Hi everybody, welcome back. In this video we're going to continue welfare economics. In the last video we finished up producer surplus. The video before that we covered consumer surplus. Now we're going to put everything together, talk about total surplus, and talk about efficiency to wrap up this section. So remember, ultimately we have consumer surplus, which was the value to the buyers, their willingness to pay, minus the amount they paid, which was the price. Another way we can think about that is if it's the value that they have minus the amount they paid, it's essentially the buyer's gains from participating in the market. It's the buyer's gains. Let's do it like buyer's gains from participating in the market. Let's put market up here. Okay, and remember, producer surplus is the price minus their costs, or also we can think about that as willingness to sell. And so this also is the seller's gains from participating in the market. Let's do this. I don't know if this is any faster, but let's just copy that and paste. No, it's no faster. Let's just write it out. From participating in the market. And so total surplus is equal to producer surplus plus consumer surplus plus producer surplus, which is equal to the value of the buyers minus the cost to the sellers, and represents the total gains from trade in a market. Okay, the reason that we have this here, value to buyers minus cost of sellers, we can just rearrange all of this. Value to buyers minus the amount paid plus the amount received. That's the same thing. Price and price, they cancel out. So all we have left is the value to the buyers plus this negative term, cost to the sellers. So ultimately, consumer surplus plus producer surplus, value to buyers minus the cost to the sellers. And it is ultimately the total gains from trade in a market. How well off are the consumers? How well off are the producers? So coming back to some of the ideas we discussed very early on how we organize economies, market economies versus command economies, essentially capitalism versus socialism in a way. Remember that in market economies, the allocation of resources is totally decentralized. Determined by the interactions of all the buyers and all the sellers. And so we're asking ourselves now, okay, we know how it works. Is this allocation desirable? And to do that, we're going to use total surplus to measure society's well-being and to consider whether or not an allocation is efficient. So there are different things to consider. We can think about efficiency, equality, equity, and so many other things. Here we're specifically focusing on efficiency, and we'll leave equality to talk about in separate videos. Okay, so let's see if this is efficient. As with many things, definitions matter. Remember, total surplus, value to buyers minus the cost to sellers. And we're going to define an allocation of resources as efficient if it maximizes total surplus. So ultimately it means the goods are consumed by the buyers who value them the most highly. They're produced by the producers with the lowest costs. And raising or lowering the quantity of a good would not increase total surplus. So with this as our kind of framework, let's think about how efficient the market equilibrium is. Okay, in a market, remember where we end up is the equilibrium price and quantity, which is here. So this allocation of goods, we can stick with the shoe market from the previous video. This allocation of goods has an equilibrium quantity of 15. And so the question is this allocation efficient? So we can look at what's our consumer surplus here. Remember, it's the area under the demand curve, but above the price. And producer surplus is the area above the supply curve and below the price. And so with this, and let's suppose that, I don't know, suppose these are thousands or millions of shoes. Let's just do thousands. So the market equilibrium is a price of $30, a quantity of 15,000 shoes, and the total surplus is consumer surplus plus producer surplus. Total surplus is this entire big triangle here. Okay, and is this equilibrium efficient? The answer is yes. And let's show why that's the case. And we're going to do that in the next slide. Page. Okay, so again, what is efficiency? It's the people who value the good the most highly buy it, and the producers who have the lowest costs sell it. So let's start here. Which buyers will consume the good? Now, this is our consumer surplus here. At a price of $30, remember, these people here, the demand curve is made up of all these marginal buyers. These people are going to buy the good. And remember, the demand curve represents their willingness to pay. There's some marginal buyer at $55 who's willing to be in the market at that price. Because he places a high value, say on the pair of shoes, he places a high value on the shoes, so if the price is $30, he's going to buy it. There's somebody down here who only values the shoes at $10. If the price is $30, they're not going to buy it. And that means that the people who value it the highest, the people who, the people who value it the highest will buy it, and the people who don't value it as much will not buy it. So from the consumer side, that's efficient. From the producer side, again, we have the people with the lowest costs here. There's somebody who can sell these shoes for $20. They're going to get $30, so they're going to produce it. Somebody here, $25, they'll get $30, they'll produce it. There's some people up here who it costs them a lot to make shoes. This person, it costs $40. And so if the price is $30, they're not going to be in the market. But all that means is that, again, the lowest cost producers will sell, and the highest cost producers won't sell. So what do we have? Every buyer whose willingness to pay is greater than or equal to 30 will buy. The others will not. And vice versa for the sellers, the producers. And so the buyers who value the good the most highly are the ones who consume it. The sellers with the lowest cost of producing the good are the ones who produce it. And so we do see that the market equilibrium quantity maximizes total surplus. It meets our definition of efficiency. And if we had any other quantity, we would be decreasing total surplus. If we had a quantity here, which we'll talk about in our next set of lectures on taxation and the welfare impacts of taxation, if we're at some allocation that's not the market equilibrium, we're going to have a mismatch between the valuation and the costs that don't line up with the individual values and individual costs. And so here, just kind of some quotes from Adam Smith and this idea of the market allocation through no individual actors or entities' actions. We have people coming together, meeting in the middle at some market price. That market price, remember, nobody decides it. It's just the market. It's the value of buyers, the costs of sellers. Nobody's telling us how much we should use or have. And we're going to end up with the most efficient equilibrium price and quantity of goods, such that the people with the highest valuation of the good buy it, the people with the lowest costs produce it. Okay, and so no other outcomes achieves higher total surplus. The other tough thing, let me come back to this. If we come back to this idea of a centralized economy, centralized government making all the decisions for the economy, imagine how hard it would be for the government to come up with this precise allocation of goods, to decide, okay, we need to send 15,000 shoes to this city because that's what the people demand, that's what the sellers produce. Because in a command-based economy, there is no supply curve, there is no demand curve. The central government just decides, okay, here's our quantity of goods. We're gonna give 15,000 goods. But in order for them to land on that, you have to know the individual costs of every single seller in the entire economy, and you have to know every single individual valuation of not only shoes, but different types of food, different types of consumer goods, non-consumer goods, even non-tradable items, things in the environmental goods and resources. And so for a centralized economy to arrive precisely at the most efficient allocation of goods is just nearly an impossible task. Oops. And so that brings us back to this idea of a market equilibrium being the most efficient, achieving the highest total surplus, and ultimately all of this is happening without any centralized control. So like I was just saying, to allocate, if we had a central planner to allocate resources efficiently and maximize total surplus, that person or that group of people would need to know every single seller's cost and every single buyer's value of that good for every good in the entire economy. And so That is why when we have seen some centralized economies try to operate in the past, there are often a lot of shortages or surpluses, and ultimately we don't end up with a very efficient allocation of the goods in the economy. Okay, and so that's gonna do it for this video and for this little series on welfare economics. We're gonna take what we've learned here, and in the next series of videos, learn about taxation and how taxes impact economies, and particularly the welfare, the consumer and producer surplus of people in economies. So stay tuned for those next videos on taxation, and I'll see you guys then. Thanks.